And with no further ado, I would like to get our introduction for our keynote speaker this morning. The first speaker of the day of day one of the HEAL conference, which is on the topic of mind-body systems, pain, inflammation, and healing. Our mental and emotional well-being significantly impact our physical health and vice versa. One important area of study in this realm is the relationship between the mind, body, systems, pain, and inflammation, and ultimately healing. To help us in this endeavor, we invite Dr. Ryan Castle, the Director of Research, the Chopra Foundation. Please welcome Dr. Ryan, our first speaker of the conference.
Thank you very much, Malika. Also thank all of you for being here. You may notice there's a slight difference in the agenda. I am not here to talk about optimizing learning tools, although that's great as well. But fortunately, I am also here to talk about rerouting signals. So just reroute the signals that your agenda is giving you, and instead, unfortunately deal with whatever it is I'm going to lecture at you about. So my name is Ryan Castle. I run the IBIS Optum research organization as well as the Chopra Foundation Institute. And in both of those areas, I do my best to try to leverage my background in public health to try to approach things from a systems perspective. I really believe that the biggest problem that is facing public health right now, and especially in the field of wellness, is the fact that too many things are siloed. That systems are only emphasized within specific disciplines. That if you are looking at things from a cardiovascular perspective, they may map every single aspect of the circulatory system and every chronic condition that affects the heart, but they're not looking at psychiatric contributors to those problems, and so on. And I feel that if we are able to combine these different systems, if we're able to approach things from a multidisciplinary perspective, then we can start to not only bring people back to a baseline of health, but actually optimize that health, improve from the status quo rather than maintaining it. The work that we do at the Chopra Foundation is based on that premise. The Chopra Foundation Institute is the research branch of the foundation. It was founded by Dr. Deepak Chopra and myself about 10 years ago. He's the founder, and I am the director of the operations. We do our best to try to put out peer-reviewed research on mind-body interventions, on integrative medicine, and our goal is not simply to put out more papers of the same thing saying, oh, it turns out meditation is good for you. Yeah, we all know. Why is it good for you? What is the quantifiable metric that we can be able to cite? What are the meta-analyses and systematic reviews that are able to support this information? We try to make it so that when people need to be able to talk to a skeptic, when they need to be able to talk to a practitioner or a doctor and try to make the case of, well, yeah, but is it real? I mean, how do we know it's not just placebo effect? We should be able to have easily referenced research to say, this is how we know, this right here. And that's what we try to either build ourselves or collaborate with other organizations to put together, because the information is out there. And as I'm pretty sure everybody in this room knows, these things work. We've all seen it. We've all seen it in person. We've seen it in studies, most likely. We've seen it anecdotally. But the problem is putting it into a context where everybody can access it. We also are pursuing an advanced longevity program at the Chopra Foundation Institute. And that is a large-scale project that's bringing in partners across the world to try to find the best combination of therapeutics and mind-body interventions to maximize longevity. And that's not just lifespan, the number of years lived, but we're also talking about health span. Because if you spend the last 30 years of your life suffering in agony and chronic illnesses, that's not really living. We need to be able to have people live healthy years, not just breathing years. So speaking of that chronic pain, The reason I was asked here this weekend is one of the papers that we recently came out with, which is based on looking at yoga as a pain management system. More specifically, yoga as an indication of mind-body interventions as a complex adaptive system. And I'll get into a little bit about that, about why that's an important innovation. But the real crux of it is we tried to figure out, we studied, we analyzed hundreds of different studies, tens of thousands of different data points to try to figure out what exactly happens in the body when you're having chronic pain, when you're having illnesses that exacerbate that through inflammation, and when you try to treat those things either through standard opioid painkillers or through mind-body interventions such as yoga. We used yoga as the baseline because it combines a mind-body meditative perspective with a physical movement perspective. So it's sort of the whole package, but when you break it down, pretty much every mind-body intervention has some component that factors into this. And what we found in this is that there are components of rerouting signals and neurotagging. We were able to do this by approaching things quantitatively and mapping out the data points, finding patterns, finding what are the networks of communication between all these different systems. And we found the first quantifiable, mathematically sustainable, complex adaptive system as a mind-body intervention. So, getting into the fun part, well, hopefully for any of you who are as nerdy as I am, signals and neurotagging. So, we don't actually have pain nerves. Like, it's not that when you get poked, your body is able to suddenly recognize, oh, that was pain. Absolutely. There's dedicated nerves that are just for pain. No, we have something called nociceptors. And those are able to interpret signals that come in. And those signals can be a gentle push or a jab. And your nociceptors have to send those signals and your brain has to tag them. Was that gentle? Was that uncomfortable? Was that painful? The problem is that system can become overwhelmed. And that's generally what happens with chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation causes extensive over-signaling. So over and over again, those systems of signals are getting sent the alert, something's happening, something's happening, something's happening. And so over time, the body starts saying, okay, well, it was pain last time, so I'm just gonna say every time any signal comes through, it's pain. We're just gonna shortcut this. And that's where you get into a chronic pain loop. So that people who suffered injuries long after the physical injury might be healed, or at least negligibly damaged, they're still experiencing excruciating pain on a daily basis. And unfortunately, that's something that is very problematic to treat in orthodox systems. The main way that we've had of dealing with it is simply throwing opioids or other pain blockers at it. And the problem with pain blockers is that that doesn't stop the loop. It doesn't cut off the inflammatory loop. It just makes it so that you don't feel for a period of time, you don't feel what those signals are communicating. But as soon as it wears off, that pain comes right back. So what we looked into was the capability of mind-body systems to be able to interact with that inflammatory chronic pain loop. And what we discovered was that it was able to reroute the signals themselves, not simply block us from receiving them, but it was able to interact with them and intercept them and reroute it. And it does that through a number of different mechanisms. Part of it is reducing the overall peripheral inflammatory response, and that effectively helps bring down the loop overall. So you're no longer experiencing as intense of a feedback system. Your body is not as inflamed. Cytokines are not flushing your system. You don't have as much swelling. You don't have as much nervous excitation. But we also found that it was able to reduce hyperarousal in the HPA axis. And one of the things that's really interesting on that is when we're able to start to influence the actual reactions of the body, rather than simply muffle them or block them, then we're able to start to change what signals are going where. What are the nociceptors responding? And especially with yoga, we found that intensive practice of yoga, and this specifically was the yoga that incorporated mind-body aspects, so meditative practices, kundalini, and so forth, it increased interoception. So that's when you're able to sense what's happening inside your body, rather than simply, oh, it's cold outside. It's hurting in my gut. My back hurts. I'm feeling warm inside. There's something wrong, or there's something right. That's interoception. Most of us don't practice interoception, and unfortunately, that's the kind of the default in a lot of Western societies. Is simply we only look on the outside world and we never look inside, either mentally or physically. Yoga forces us to do both at the same time, and we found that something really fascinating happens when you do both of those things at the same time. For one thing, the reduction of that arousal system means that the pain that you might feel in your back, let's say you have chronic back pain, and normally you'd be terrified to do something like this, because that's you know it's gonna hurt. So when you do it, it hurts. When you're practicing yoga, you might do that exact same position in a pose. However, you're doing so in a controlled setting. You're doing so mindfully and with intense interoception. You're mindful of your body, of its reactions, and you're performing a set of postures and poses that are slow, conditioned, and most importantly, mindful of mind and body. And when that happens, you take that position and it doesn't hurt, or it doesn't hurt nearly as bad as it used to. And that informs your nociceptors that, oh, maybe this doesn't actually hurt. It gets tagged either at a lower rate of pain, such as, a poke, or sometimes the pain signaling actually gets rewired completely and says, you know what? We had this wrong the whole time. Sorry about that, body. Your back isn't hurting right now. So we're going to reduce that signaling. So the next time that you move your back after the yoga, you might find that there is a significantly reduced pain response, because your body has started to realize there might be something wrong with the signaling, and it's going to start to self-correct itself. One of the biggest reasons we aren't able to do this when we are outside of a mind-body practice is because we are too intensively focused on expectations. When you have cognitive disengagement, it allows us to be able to do practices and allow our interoception to recognize what is happening within ourselves without an expectation, because you're simply being in the moment rather than, oh, this is going to kill my back if I do this. I can't do this. When you simply perform the action mindfully, willfully, and carefully, you're able to remove expectation, you're able to reduce the hyperarousal of the system, you're able to re-tag those signals from the brain. Now, the way that we were able to do this and able to come up with this information, we didn't run clinical trials on this. There are hundreds of clinical trials that have already been performed on this. So instead, what we did is we gathered over 400 studies, incorporating over 1,600 different factors, and then we mapped this information out. So we pulled big data out of this. We plugged this through pattern recognition and network analysis. And then we did our best to isolate out metrics, because once again, like I said, our focus at the Chopra Foundation Institute is not simply, well, yoga works. Yeah, we know. Why? How? Those are the questions that need answering. And that's the information that if we're ever going to be able to get policy changes put in place that are going to make the practice of mind-body interventions more acceptable to insurers, to hospitals, to medical professionals, we're going to need evidence and proof of efficacy. So that's what we attempted to put together here, was exactly what is the network of functions and systems that this intervention goes through. How does it work? Why does it work? Where does it work? And what we found in the process is one of the things that I'm most excited by. As a systems guy, I love exploring interdisciplinary systems. And sort of the cream of the crop is a complex adaptive system. Now, a lot of times we consider complex adaptive systems to be something like a human being, or sometimes people will reference, the economy. Anything can be a complex adaptive system, though, if it has the right components. It has to be reactive to factors outside and inside. It has to be responsive to its environment. It has to be able to adapt, and it has to have feedback loops, among other things. There are mathematical models for what constitutes a complex adaptive system. And what we found in the process of mapping out all of the components, like I said, those 1,600 different factors, all of the components of the body's pain response system, and then the components of the interactions between yoga and the body's nervous system, we found that yoga and mind-body therapies in general constitute a complex adaptive system in and of themselves. And this is the first time this has actually been proven in a mathematical model. It's been mapped out. If you notice the picture that we have up here, all three of those are representations of a complex adaptive system. The first picture on the top is the standard map of a complex adaptive system. Then the next one right here is the human pain response network. As you can see, they are effectively identical. All of the necessary components are there. When we see mind-body interactions, that's the one right next to this over here, we see it also has all of the necessary components and additional factors. It actually has redundant systems within it, making it an intensely adaptive system. So the reason why this is relevant is because a complex adaptive system cannot be reduced. And that is one of the biggest problems in studies now, is the fact that we try a reductionist model. We try the standard reductionist model of, okay, well, if yoga really works, let's, what is the position that this asana takes? Okay, well, we're just going to put a person in a lab who has chronic back pain and have them bend over like they do in the asana. That's not the way that yoga works. It cannot be reduced down to a simple movement. It is a holistic system, truly. And that is one of the main components of a complex system. You have to take it in its whole. And that requires, for research, a multidisciplinary approach to mind-body medicine. And if anybody has ever spent some time looking at literature reviews or meta-analyses of mind-body therapies, you'll know that the number one response that keeps coming back is heterogeneous. There's the inconclusive. Too many studies are showing too many random results. Nothing seems to fit in the same category. They're not able to find the same thing twice. And part of the reason for that is so many of these studies are approaching mind-body work as a reductionist model. They're trying to isolate a single compound, a single cytokine or inflammatory marker, or a single practice, and they're cutting out everything else, hoping to reduce it down to that point. This paper, incidentally, as we put it together, we were trying to find treatments for pain. In doing so, we found an argument for redoing the research world's entire approach to how we investigate mind-body therapies. This paper has been very well received. We like to think because of the fact that we've discovered something new. We've been able to quantify something that people haven't really been able to quantify. We've been able to map out a system that people haven't been able to map before. This paper has been received in the 99th percentile of altmetric. It's among the top 4% most read papers ever put out on Frontiers. We've had almost 14,000 views and millions of views, 14,000 reads, millions of views. I know what you're thinking, like, well, okay, Ryan, you can stop bragging, that's fine. But the question to that is, okay, that's nice, who cares? Why does that matter, the fact that this paper was well received? Why is that even part of this presentation? Why didn't I just keep talking about neurotagging, which obviously is the only thing people want to hear about? And the question is, people do care. Academics care because this is indicating systems innovation. It offers non-opioid pain management options, which the country and the world are in dire need of. It showed that we can reroute signals rather than simply suppress them, and it showed effective mind-body options. The public has responded to this as a grassroots movement has responded to it because this is something addressing chronic pain, which they care about. It's safe, affordable, and is coming from a recognized entity in the Chopra Foundation. Now, the public perspective, I think, is important to pretty much everybody here. Anybody who's trying to interact with the public, trying to key into what they're working on, knows that chronic non-communicable disease is on the rise. It's increasing year after year at a steady rate, and this is due to a lot of different factors. It's due to an aging population, but it's also due to an increasing poor health of our population. And this is a huge problem that the Orthodox medical community doesn't really have a way of dealing with. The public, though, is very invested in finding a way to deal with it. When we look at, when we track Google searches across the past 10 years, we start seeing a consistent increase in people searching for information on meditation, on how to increase their lifespan, and especially yoga. You know, you're going to see a big dip right there. That was during the pandemic when, for some strange reason, people weren't enthusiastic about crowding into yoga studios. But right after that, right after the pandemic ended, numbers shot through the roof. It not only rebounded to where it was before, it went higher. People understood afterwards, I missed that. There was something benefiting me. Or I'm hearing a lot of pain, I'm having a lot of pain, and I want to find some sort of way of dealing with that. And the way we know that a lot of people are concerned about the pain is because that's the number one thing that was searched. Pain, chronic pain, how do I deal with pain? Is this pain normal? Overwhelmingly, year after year, more and more people are saying, I'm in pain, and trying to find ways of dealing with it. At the same time, searches for things related to side effects. What is this drug side effect? What are opioid side effects? What are the consequences if I take opioids for longer than my doctor prescribed? All of those have continued to increase over the past few years, especially after the pandemic. Or during the pandemic, people were very interested in side effects, but afterward as well, if you'll notice, that increased at the same rate as interest in yoga. So all of that leads back to what the Chopra Foundation Institute is working on. We're trying to approach all of these different issues, trying to address the chronic illnesses, chronic pain, and the pervasive problem with human behavior in a lot of our society, in different ways. One of which is trying to attempt reforms in the vagal system. So that's a lot of different things, from deep breathing practices to auricular stimulation, meditation, yoga. All of these things tend to activate the vagus nerve. And that has been shown to have a profound capability to reduce inflammation, to improve overall health, even affect gut health. So one of the other ways that we're approaching it is trying to discuss aspects of consciousness, exploring how do we view the world around us. The way that we perceive reality actually has a dramatic impact on how we perceive ourselves and our interactions with the people around us. We're working on releasing a paper right now on the power of non-dual conscious perspectives and mental health. That effectively, when you stop thinking of the world as us, them, then you start finding dramatic increases in mental health. And these are aspects of consciousness. And speaking of brain health and consciousness and reality, psychedelics are one of the major areas that are increasing both in public attention and also the field of research. We're finding incredible capabilities for psychedelics in terms of neuroinflammation, in terms of neurogenesis and plasticity. There's incredible potential in this field to really change the way that we process not only trauma, but pain and inflammation as a whole. Now, all of these features within the Chopra Foundation have one thing in common. They're focusing on longevity. As I mentioned before, we're not just talking about life years and how long are people going to live. We want to get a couple of extra years breathing on a respirator. We're talking about increasing the amount of time that people have on this earth to live with quality, to be able to be around the people that they love, to be able to have a meaningful existence. Because right now, people are living longer, but they're sick for longer. They're getting sick younger and living in pain longer. And that's not a winning equation. There's something wrong in the model that we have right now. And that's what we're hoping to help address. The way that we do that, as you saw through some of these things, is we approach things from a big data analytics perspective. We use AI pattern recognition and building interfaces and dashboards to try to help streamline the process and make it accessible to everyone from policymakers to practitioners to be able to use this information and do something meaningful with it. Again, it is fantastic when people are able to share testimonials and anecdotes about this. These are the things that have helped me and my friends and my family. When you try to take that to a congressional committee, that's not going to go anywhere. When you try to take that to a hospital board, that's not going to get any policies changed. We need hard data. And unfortunately, in the mind-body world, usually we have qualitative data. And we're trying to help bridge that divide to help make it easier and more accessible for people to actually do something with this information. If you're interested in more from the Chopra Foundation, this is a QR code to their contact page on their website. Please check that out. You can just scan it with your phones. We are constantly in need of volunteers, collaborators, donations, any sort of help. The Chopra Foundation Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit, so we're trying to make very large changes with a fairly small organization. So if you want to reach out and see if there's any sort of collaboration or work that you would like to do with us, we'd love to hear from you. Just please reference in the email where you're hearing about us from. Let them know it's from the HEAL conference, because I don't get CC'd on those emails. So if you don't tell them who they are, they're never going to forward it over to me. If you're interested in more from me directly, first of all, thanks. Second of all, I would love to do more personally, because while the Chopra Foundation is an incredible organization and they do really good work, there are certain areas where a 501c3 is limited. And one of the big areas that my personal research company, IBIS Optum Research, has been trying to explore is scalability. And unfortunately, when you are dependent on donations, it is very difficult to create a mind-body system or a behavioral change system that is directly scalable, because you don't have the feedback loop of money. And so that's what we're trying to explore on my side with our for-profit company, is looking into the same sort of factors from a much smaller level. So starting from a grassroots perspective, trying to look at how do we encourage behavioral changes, because we all know what we need to do. It's, if somebody says, well, how do we fix the obesity epidemic? No one's going to be like, what's this thing I hear about exercise? I don't know how to pronounce it. No, we all know. The problem is doing it. And the problem with that is chunking, it's gamifying, it's finding ways to make it dynamic, make it interesting, include it into the systems that we already have built into our society everywhere, which are keyed into dopamine hits and reinforcement. And that's what we're trying to develop, is putting together systems that reinforce behaviors that are going to extend our health span, and doing it in a way that is going to be easy, it's going to be accessible, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be scalable. And in so doing, this is, a great system. This is one of the things that people are searching for the most, as I referenced, in this country. People really want something that does that. And if we're able to build something that will do that for people, then we have the opportunity to save millions of years of healthy life for people all over the country and all over the world. And with the group of people I'm looking at right now, I already know that everybody in this room is working hard to do exactly that in all of your own ways. So I'm really honored to be here with all of you. If any of you want to contact me, this is my direct info. And thank you so much. It's a pleasure.